Hey everyone, we're back again. This is our second week of Let's Talk Business. We're face streaming live. My name is Lee Meadows. I'm a professor of management at Walsh College, and I'm also a leadership consultant. And we are engaging in this week's activity to try to bring the world of business into focus, and specifically business issues that deal primarily with people in the workplace. Well, the workplace is always going to be our context every week that we meet. We want to talk about how people interact. We talk about some of the issues that are impacting people as they are in the workplace. We want to spend some time talking about, of course, leadership, which is kind of our main focus, some things around careers, and all those things that we just think are important to know about being at work. So when we talk business, we talk about being at work. We're talking about interacting at work. We're also talking about making sure that our interactions are positive and productive in terms of kind of helping the profit line and advancing folks as they go along too. Now, we can't do this without some acknowledgement from the folks who've been supportive of us throughout this entire endeavor. We always like to send a shout out to our very special sponsors, Sigrid Solutions, who do a lot of great leadership development work, our friends at Priority Health and Spectrum Health, our good folks out at Bridgewater Interiors. We thank them so much. Walsh College has always been a big supporter of everything that we're doing. Again, a shout out to our folks at the Great Lakes Benefits Group, our friends at Paylocity and at Heritage Optical, and of course, our good friends at Miller Marketing. We are always grateful that you all take time out from your busy schedule to spend time with us and support the efforts that's going on here. And I'm grateful. I appreciate that. Well, if you are here in the state of Michigan, and I suppose this is what's going on in other states around us, we are reopening. Guidelines are being lifted. Reopening is starting to happen across the country, in lieu of a lot of other negative things that have been going on. And we'll talk about those in a few minutes. The country and the world is trying to get themselves reacclimated to what's going on. And so if you're here in the state of Michigan, obviously you've been following this with great anticipation. We know some of the impact that's been happened by that, and we want to make sure that as we reopen, we are reopening with a good sense of, with some common sense and, with a good focus toward the future. So for those of you who are actively engaged in the process of reopening, you know that our governor, Gretchen Whitmer, who has done such a fantastic job of leading us through this crisis, has now put some guidelines in place for us to think about and for us to consider as we move through this. And here's some of the things that stand out so far. Retailers can reopen to customers without an appointment coming this Thursday, well, just past Thursday anyway. Restaurants can offer dining services starting next week on the 8th. Bars can also reopen and restaurants and bars, they're going to have capacity limits. Day camps for children, and those are going to be open, but with reduced capacity. There's going to be some regulations around camps that are pretty much pending. Libraries and museums can open on June 8th, but everything is subject to capacity rules. In-home services like house cleaning can resume. Gym and fitness centers can offer outdoor activities only, such as classes and training sessions, as long as there's participants, coaches, and spectators stay 6 feet apart. I suppose there's a lot of folks who are looking forward to getting back into those areas. Office work that can't be done remotely is permitted. The workers must continue to telework to the extent possible. Drive-in movie theaters can open. How about that? I haven't been to a drive-in movie theater in a long time, so I'm clearly looking forward to taking advantage of that. This phased resumption of bottle returns also starts around June 15th, and schools will continue to remain closed until, except for remote learning. So, those are some of the things that we are handling. Those are some of the things we're dealing with now that we've got some guidelines in place, and because those guidelines in place. What we anticipate now, what we look forward to now, is the fact that the folks are going to be returning to the workplace. Yeah, and engage in all kinds of things that come with that. Well, here's some things we want you to think about. As we start to roll forward with this, it becomes important for us to begin to think about how do we begin to bring them back. What's going to how's this thing really going to unfold for us, ladies and gentlemen? What is it going to look like? We will slowly have to bring people back. We will slowly have to take into account the fact that guidelines and policies have to be put in place. But I think there's some things that we are going to have to think about and keep in mind as we begin to move through this. There's going to be it's not going to be the same workplace that we left 3 months ago. In fact, a lot of things are going to be different. Here's some interesting work that's been done by the folks at Gallup, who want employers to know what are the things that they are up against in terms of bringing folks back. And here's some things that they just kind of finished this research just in the last month or so. But look at some of these figures. 59% of employees surveyed would like to work remotely as possible. So now that they've worked from home, they actually like being at home and working. And they are, in that same percentage, is confident that they have successfully met their job requirements. 41% want to return to working at the office as much as they previously did. But I think they're in for a rude awakening because the office that they're returning to won't be the office that they left. What they've also found is that engagement is highest among employees who spend 3 to 4 days working remotely. And that if given the opportunity, 54% of office workers say they'd leave their job for one that offers flexible work time. What's happened? They've gotten used to flexible work time. That's what we're up against in terms of the research. And here's what makes it even so more interesting. If we're going to bring them back, you got to ask yourself, well, what are they giving up in order to come back? Well, I don't know about the rest of you, but I suspect a lot of folks have found that they've been spending a lot of less time on the road. And for anybody who's involved in any kind of long commute, you have had 3 months now of not having to commute to work and from work. You haven't been caught up in commuter traffic. You haven't been subject to accidents on the highway or breakdown or running behind or anything like that. I think that's going to be a major factor when employers start thinking about, well, what do we do to bring them back? Interestingly enough, according to the research, there's actually been greater productivity from people working at home. Now, you can have your own speculations as to what that might mean, but for the most part, what it essentially means is, thanks for the thumbs up out there. I appreciate that. What that means is that, if you as a manager think that you have to be able to eyeball anyone in order to ensure their productivity, this shoots that argument all apart. Folks have experienced greater productivity because they've been working from home, and they're working in a cleaner environment. And by that we mean that people take care of their own environment. They do their own wipe down. They're in their own rooms. They keep things sanitized the way that they want. So why not? And also, think about the amount of money that's been saved since you've been working from home. Probably a lot more discretionary income because we haven't had anything to spend it on. So money's been saved in terms of gas and food and all that. Well, that's going to be difficult to give up. And according to the survey, more people are a lot more satisfied working from home than they are going to work. I think that's going to be an area of resistance that we really have to spend some time thinking about. There's been less sickness. Now you can't factor in COVID-19 as an issue when they talk about less sickness. What they mean, what's underneath the data is less inclined to catch a cold, less inclined to get injured, less inclined to feel tired, those kinds of things. And folks have had the audacity to say that they actually have more time for fitness. And here's hoping that's what they've been doing with that. But that's what you're up against in terms of bringing your employees back. And what that essentially means is that when you are bringing them back, you are not onboarding these folks. They've already been onboarded. What you are doing is you are reboarding these individuals, and that's a different mindset. This isn't new employees coming to the workplace. This is folks who've already been there. And so some of the common sense recommendations that have been coming out around this are reboarding policies on social distancing, workspace, and safety. They should already be in play because it's not the same workplace. So before you can even come back and be reboarded, these things have to already be in place, and you already have to know what they are. The recommendation is that you reboard anyone and everyone in a leadership role. Standard operating procedure is that managerial practices never take into account things like social distancing. So we're going to have to revisit things like emotional intelligence, communication, performance review, and teamwork. We also have to ensure that managers understand the reboarding to the workplace is a management practice. And for my human resource folks out there, it's not an HR task. Managers are responsible for reboarding their employees in their department in accordance to the new policies, procedures, safety, and all those other things. And you reboard everybody. Reboard employees irrespective of whether they are a Phase 1 employee or a Phase 10 employee. It doesn't matter. Everybody should be reboarded. You know, one of the things that a number of you probably noticed when you've gone to grocery stores is that they have signs on the floor and directing foot traffic. Well, you may ask yourself, is that something that we need to consider back in the workplace? With long corridors and folks running out of cubicles, well, it's not too far-fetched a thought. And here's the other thing that comes up. Is this meeting necessary? Should be a standard question when bringing employees into a physical setting. We've all been there. We've all worked in organizations, and one of our common complaints is always we spend too much time in meetings. Well, the workplace that we left, where we spent too much time in meetings, we were all in close proximity in a physical setting, sitting next to each other, looking to see what we were doing on each other's computers, reading our phones, rarely paying attention to what's going on. But we were in a crowded space. And people oftentimes call meetings to decide whether or not they're going to call a meeting for a meeting that they want to call. Well, now, with given this whole impact of COVID and what it's done to us, if you're going to call a meeting and bring us into a physical setting together, that meeting had better be absolutely necessary. You may have to consider staggering people when they arrive and when they leave. Now, that's a concept that we've been experimenting with that concept since commuter traffic first showed up and never really got around to it. Well, this may be one of those situations where you may have to start thinking about the number of people who come in and the phase in which they come in, the time they arrive and the time that they leave. And prudence does suggest that when COVID-19 ends, it really hasn't. So happy days are here again because we are reopening, but we're still opening with some degree of caution. Now, of course, when we start to think through a lot of this, and what it means relative to getting the workplace ready, well, policies, procedures, safety regulations, all those things have to be in place, because what we all have to realize is that 3 months ago, think of it like this: 3 months ago, we were on a ship that docked at a port that we call home. And we stayed away from it. We stayed away for almost 3 months. Now the ship has pulled back into port, and we're ready to reboard, but we're not reboarding the same ship under the same circumstances when we left. And so we got to be real mindful of how that begins to happen. Now, even after you roll all those things in place, I think there's still a question out there looming on the horizon that you really need to give some consideration to. Keep in mind what the data has said. 59% of people that they've surveyed said, I would just as soon work from home. 41% said, yeah, I'll go back to work, but you know what? I think what's going to happen? the first 2 days after they've been in commuter traffic, that sentiment is probably going to change considerably. But as a manager, a leader, supervisor, anyone who is in a situation where you can be of service in terms of the people you report to, here's a question I want you to give some thought to and try to think about it from the employee's point of view. Here's the question. If I commute to work to be in the office so I can work at a safe social distance and wear a face mask all day, as opposed to working from home with no mask or commute, I have to wonder, why am I here? Now, while we know that we're going to put some safeguards in place to ensure that we can have a safe workplace, I challenge any of you who've never worn a face mask all day to go out and ask people who have been doing this for a while, what does it feel like? What does it feel like to wear a face mask all day? Check with your local hospital. Call one of your local hospitals and check with the nursing supervisor, the nurse in charge, or any of the attendants. Ask anybody who has to wear a face mask all day, what is that like? What are some issues that result from that? Because keep in mind, this is something that we've never done before. We've never had to sit and think about, what it means to wear what it means to wear a face mask. And I defy anyone to say, "Oh, that's got to be pretty easy." Well, then you do it, and let me know if it's easy. So, if I've got to commute back to work to be in a safe space and wear a face mask all day as opposed to working from home with no mask and no commute, I have to wonder, why am I here? And I would wonder that along with anybody else as well. So we're excited. We're excited about the prospect of the businesses reopening, getting back into the flow of things, getting into what's categorized as the next new normal. We want to get our hair done, our nails done. We want to get a haircut. We want to be able to sit in restaurants. We want to have a beer. We want to socialize. We want to be able to do all those things that allow us to engage as human beings on the planet. It's just that now it's coming with some safeguards, and some of those safeguards are things that are absolutely necessary in order to ensure that we'll keep moving forward. So these are just some things to think about as we roll along. Again, we don't have all the answers, but business drives 99% of everything that goes on related to our economy. And as business goes, so we go. So we're having the opportunity to reopen. We're having the opportunity to get to become profitable again. People who own small businesses are getting the opportunity to get their businesses up and running again, and we are so grateful for that. We're thankful for that. But it still comes with some precautions and some safeguards, and I want you all to keep those things in mind as this happens. Celebrate the fact that we're reopening, but still maintain your cautions as well. So we will continue to do webinars. We'll continue these kind of talks every week, and every time we do something like this, we always want to make sure we're promoting some good things that are going on. So for those of you who are, as we start to wind down, things start to open up on the 11th. But as things start to wind down, let me tell you about a couple of events that are going on that I think you'll find to be pretty helpful. On June 10th from noon to 1 o'clock, the American Heart Association, in partnership with the National Association of African Americans and Human Resources, is having a webinar. And this webinar is going to focus on important issues for HR professionals, business owners, and entrepreneurs as we get ready to reopen. They're going to talk about some of the health disparities of COVID-19. They're going to talk about how you manage the workplace for essential critical infrastructure. We're going to look at resources for small business owners, payroll protection, zero-interest loans, all those kinds of things working. And of course, looking at resources and tools to support the workplace wellness initiatives post-COVID-19. We've got a great panel of folks who are going to be presenting during that time. LaTanya Daniels, who works with the American Heart Association, is their Vice President for Human Resources. Our own Rodney Bellamy, who is part of the National Association of African Americans and Human Resources here with the state of Michigan, and also employee relations with Wayne State University. Cheryl Larry Osmond, who works at Henry Ford Hospital and does is also connected in terms of looking at some of the health issues that are going to go with that. And our own Dr. Kenneth Harris, who is at the National Business League, is also going to be one of our panel speakers. So it's going to be a great presentation. You can RSVP by June 8th. But feel free to go to the American Heart Association website or the National Association of African Americans and Human Resources website, and feel free to click on. Come and join us. I think you're going to find that information very helpful. Now, the next day, there's also going to be a webinar, where on June 10th, the webinar is going to be from noon to 1. The next day, the Voice of Leadership in the COVID-19 Era is also a virtual summit that's being sponsored by our Michigan chapter of the National Association of African Americans and Human Resources, and we're proud to sponsor this. We've got a fantastic panel lined up. How about this? Jerome the Bus Bettis, Mr. Pittsburgh Steeler and Super Bowl winner, and native Detroiter is going to talk about some things from his point of view. And we have secured the Lieutenant Governor, Garland Gilchrist II, is going to be joining us to talk about some of the policies issues with this. And locally, our own Donna Murray Brown, who's the president and CEO of the Michigan Nonprofit Association, is also going to be on board to share some issues. So we're going to hit you back to back. June 10th, American Heart Association, in conjunction with some number of things that we're doing. And the very next day, the Voice of Leadership in the COVID Era, this virtual summit is being presented and was being sponsored by the Great Lakes Benefit Group. Again, my buddies Kareem and Rod and all the rest of them who are over there. And then our good friend Cassandra Harvey at Exodus Consulting is also going to be one of the sponsors for this. So we're hitting you back to back. June 10th, noon to 1, and June 11th from 10:30 to 11:30. 7 great panelists across 2 days. You can't help but love it. You can't help but love the fact that these are the kinds of things that we are still able to provide for all of you, given this pandemic COVID-19 era that we're all living in. And there's always a ton of information that continues to get circulated out there, and we want to make sure that all of you get the information as much as possible. So don't next Tuesday, noon to 1, you just you need a break from something, come join us on that particular webinar. And the following day, it's 10:30 to 11:30. It's an hour of your time, but it's going to be great information shared with the idea of trying to get all of us on board with some of the things that have been going on, and how do we keep ourselves prepared as we get ready for this reopening. And what a marvelous opportunity to make sure that this reopening goes well. So it's been my pleasure to have an opportunity to again address you this second week. I want to say I appreciate the comments and suggestions that a number of you have sent me since our last show, and I'm going to use that information as we go along. And as I start to get a little bit more comfortable with this, of course, I'm going to be inviting some guests to join me. But I do appreciate the fact that you did take time to look at it, even though it had already been broadcast. And I hope to continue to build your support as we go. I hope you find these kinds of talks particularly helpful. And and in the spirit of giving, we always like to make sure that we are doing something that you find useful. And so I'll always end with this particular quote, because I find so much joy and happiness in being able to say this. But the best way to make a difference is to be the difference. The best way to make a difference is to be the difference. So for all of you who tuned in this week, thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you next week. You stay safe.